watch enthusiasts. Now today I have a beautiful watch from Dan Henry. Now, if you remember, I reviewed their 1970, a watch which I bought for myself because I just loved the look of the watch, a few weeks ago, and I was extremely pleased with the watch. Now Dan Henry have been in contact with me as a result of the review, and offered to send me a 1963 for review. And now for those who don't know, this is a pilot's chronograph inspired by 1950s and 1960s pilot's chronographs, produced by, for example, Breitling or Hoyer. And understandably, I was extremely excited to see this watch, and having seen the watch and having worn it for about a week now, I can say that I'm not in any way disappointed. Now, I'd like to state before this review, as I do with all the reviews where the brand has sent me the watch, that this review is in no way biased as a result of being given the watch. Now, this is simply because I feel that my integrity and my honesty to my viewers is paramount if I'm to give an honest and a worthwhile review, because really, what's the point of lying to you and causing you to waste your money on a product that I don't believe in? So I'm extremely pleased to say that this definitely passed the test of watches which are worthy of review. So without further ado, I shall show you the packaging. And the packaging is extremely similar to that of the 1970, which I reviewed. But for those who haven't seen it, I shall go through it anyway. So it comes in this plastic case, which is, you'll notice it does pop together. The only thing is that I've opened it up, and due to the fact that I'm not very skillful with regards to folding the watch roll inside here, I'm unable to get it small enough to be able to close again. But that's my fault, not the brand's. So it comes in this plastic case, which is shock resistant. Nothing out of the ordinary, nothing too elaborate or interesting, but does protect the watch roll and the watch itself in shipping, which is something good when I've seen that a lot of watches which arrive that I've bought previously under my own steam. So notably, for example, my Seiko 55 Fathoms arrived and the package was slightly bumped as a result of shipping, but here there's no danger of that. So within this packaging, there's a really rather nice watch roll, which this watch comes with, which is a canvas and distressed leather type of watch roll. So you'll notice it comes in this sort of khaki green, which is very neutral and gives a very old-fashioned sort of a look, a very vintage appeal, and really will suit any watch, I think, that's put into it. So it's bound with this waxed canvas string, which is a nice and secure way of closing it, and then simply unrolls like so to reveal the contents. Once open, this roll contains 3 compartments, which are kept apart by a weave and by this flap. So when one opens it, one sees 3 things. I'm afraid it's very difficult to get into the camera, so I'll take the things out of the box in just a moment, out of the roll in just a moment. But before I do that, it contains a NATO strap, which is a rather interesting NATO strap. So I'll show you that in just a moment. The watch itself here, and then a warranty card from Dan Henry, which provides an international warranty on the watches if something is to go wrong. So I'll put this all away and then get straight back to you with the watch and its strap. Okay, so here we have the watch itself, and I must say it truly is a beautiful timepiece. It harks back to the design of watches such as the Breitling Copilot from the 1960s, which was designed specifically for pilots who needed more timing and time zone equipment rather than the sort of more complex watches which could calculate things like fuel consumption, like the Navitimer. So this offers a very classic but still quite contemporary and still relevant design, which in my opinion is very attractive. But I'll go through the watch itself to explain all the different features. So the case itself is a 316L stainless steel case, and it features brushed lug tops, as you can see. And then if we move over to the side of the watch, we see that it has brushed edges as well on the sides, but it does have these polished bezels to give the whole watch a slightly more luxurious look, and a more interesting look, really, when one sees a lot of watches around this price point, around the £200 to £250 mark, with fully brushed or fully polished cases, whereas here an effort really has been made to have different finishes. There is also a polished ring around the back of the watch here, which also does lend to showing a division between the sides of the case and the back. Now, what one will notice if one looks at it like this is that the lugs curve down greatly to give better comfort on the wrist. And this is a 42.5mm watch, but wears remarkably small due to the fact that these lugs curve down like this, which really do hug the wrist. But I'll show you that in the wrist shot. The case back of the watch is a true beauty. Like similarly to the 1970, the 1963 features a feature, if you will, an embossed sculpture, if you will, on the back. It really is something of that beauty. And here they've embossed very, very deeply an SR-71 Blackbird spy plane, the Mach 3 Cold War spy plane made by the US, or made for the US forces to combat the Soviet Union. But an interesting thing to have on the back of this watch, and certainly a really attractive detail, and one which one doesn't see usually for this sort of price. Equally, the back of the watch does show that it's the 1963, this version. Dan Henry, water resistant to 50 meters or 165 feet, which really is all one needs in a pilot's watch. Though I can see why some people would want a higher water resistance. For me, this is just fine. It's also a limited edition, limited to 1963 minus 0207 of those 1963. And of course, the case is stainless steel. Now, on the front of the watch, one sees the particular detail which I chose, which is there's either a black painted bezel version or a brushed stainless steel bezel version. Now, I picked the brushed stainless steel version because one's already seen a few painted versions on YouTube before, and I thought it'd be nice to show people an alternative. I'm also a great fan of brushed stainless steel bezels because I think they offer a slightly more clean look and allow the bezel to sink away from the watch and become altogether more discreet. Whereas I think a dark bezel can really draw the eye. So here, this bezel moves in 5-minute increments, or I suppose an hour increments, between these points, like so. And this is a GMT bezel. So so here I'm running GMT, GMT time exactly because I'm in England. But say I were to move to Central Europe, then if I moved the bezel here, that would move my 12 o'clock point to this point here, thus allowing me to see the time over there. So rather than being just about quarter to 11, it would be quarter to 12. So that's a very nice touch on an aviation timepiece, rather than having a timing bezel having a GMT bezel. Now, equally, one notices around the bezel it has a coin edge, which doesn't catch doesn't really catch cuffs or anything, but does offer a good degree of grip. The bezel isn't loomed, which I can see being a bit of a disadvantage for some people who would want to use this watch in the dark primarily, but I haven't had any issues with this because, well, really, I haven't really used this watch at night. I don't tend to, but I can see why some people would want a bit of loom on this bezel, but I do think it gives for a very unified look to have that black triangle at 12 o'clock. Now, the markings on this bezel are sort of black enamel inside these engraved indices, and I find that to be a very durable and an attractive way of showing it. Also, a very legible way of showing the time. Now, moving on to the dial, one has to look through this highly domed crystal, which is a mineral crystal which then has a sapphire coating. Now, some people, and actually I, as a watch lover, of course, I like having a good sapphire crystal. But it has to be said that whereas, yes, it doesn't offer quite the scratch resistance of sapphire, mineral crystal with a sapphire coating does offer certain advantages, such as the fact that having that mineral crystal base means that it's far more shock resistant if you strike the watch on something, but also has the scratch resistance of the sapphire on the surface. So this does have its advantages, and I think does suit this watch rather nicely, due to the refractivity of this, giving the whole watch a slightly less legible, but just a very pleasing amount of distortion on the dial, which is very difficult to film, but certainly a pleasure to look at when one does wear the watch. Also has little curves in the crystal, which I noticed on the 1970 as well, which allow the crystal to look somewhat like perspex or plexiglass, like the originals. So if one flips the watch on its side, one can see the doming of that crystal. If I can just get it into focus for you. There we are, we can see the doming. and it domes out quite quickly on the edges and then flattens in the centre, but still retaining that soft plexiglass look, which I, having owned a number of plexiglass crystal watches, do like a lot. But of course, they do offer very little scratch resistance, which is something nice to see on this watch. Now, the dial itself is a matte black dial. I'll just bring it close to the camera to best show it to you. So it's a matte black dial with Dan Henry at the 12 o'clock point, and three subdials in a tri-compact layout. One quirk which one notices is that the sub-second dial over here, I'll start the chronograph to show you. There we are, nice firm click, is slightly larger than the other two, which is a direct reference, in my opinion, to the Breitling Copilot from the 1960s, which had that layout because the ground crews who used this watch had to prepare aircraft in 15 minutes. And do correct me if I'm wrong. I read this up on a couple of websites, but they had to prepare their aircraft in 15 minutes. So this was a 15-minute timer, which was slightly larger to enable higher legibility, which is a really nice touch to see that Dan Henry are harking back to these particular details, which were so important to their original counterparts. The subdials are slightly recessed, as you can see, with rims, and they also have I'm not sure if you can see it, but they also have a sort of a guilloche pattern on them to further that that attractive appearance, which they do have, as you can see in the distortion. One can see the little strakes on them. Now, the hands are these fairly simple aviator-style hands, but ones which are nicely loomed and do offer a great deal of legibility because they are very different lengths and thicknesses. Now, in terms of the functions of the different subdials, one sees the chronograph minutes, of course in the centre the chronograph seconds, and here the first 30 seconds it does do sub-seconds on this dial. Of course, one also has the running seconds down here. Now, one detail which I'd like to point out about this dial is the fact that it is a sandwich dial. As you can see, if you look at that 12 o'clock, the loom patch is actually sitting beneath the dial, beneath the cutout, which is a lovely detail, and one which I actually haven't seen on an aviation watch before. I've only ever seen them on sort of Panerai or that style of watch and their homages. But no, here they've really taken that design and a detail which I particularly like. I've always liked sandwich dials, but here they really have taken it and used it very nicely. Now, around the edge of the dial, one sees these indices for the seconds and minutes, and they've split them into two rings. So one has the individual minutes or seconds, and then the increments between those placed further towards the edge of the dial. And this reminds me of old Hoyer Octavias with their second tracks of this type to allow great legibility, because one can quickly see which second you're on or which minute you're on, without having to strain your eyes and search between the intermediate increments between those. Now, equally, the movement inside this watch is an interesting one, and I think a good choice. It's not a mechanical chronograph, and of course, I'd love to see a mechanical chronograph. It's unbelievable what Alpha can do, for example, with these mechanical chronographs, but with the best will in the world, the mechanical chronographs around this price simply don't offer the quality of the quartz ones, which are also available. And this features the Miyota quartz movement, which is quite large, actually. It takes up most of the case, most of the inside of the case, which is nice because one often sees a lot of watches where, or at least quartz watches, where the movement is actually sitting very small in the middle of the case, which does mean that after the years, over the years, when one pulls out the crown, the whole dial wobbles and so on. Whereas here, actually, the movement takes up the vast majority of the case, leading to a very firm feel on the crown. But I'll show you that in a moment. Now, so in terms of accuracy, this movement so far has been very accurate. It's gained, I think, 1.5 seconds or 2 seconds this week. So it's very accurate and has kept time very, very pleasingly. Of course, the advantage of also having a Miyota movement in this watch is serviceability. This watch can be serviced extremely easily, even after the warranty runs out by any local watchmaker worth their salt, which is a nice thing to see, really. So in terms of the action of this chronograph, it's a very simple design. It's the same as most chronographs, where the top pusher starts and stops the chronograph. As you can see, when one stops it, the sub-seconds do start off again. But Yes, and also what's nice about this chronograph is it does offer some of the feel of a mechanical chronograph, because rather than pushing in and simply sort of squashing down, for want of a better word, the pushes do actually click. They click very firmly and do offer a great deal of feel in the hand. Of course, it resets like a quartz movement, though, so it resets back round rather than shooting back, which some people may not like, but it doesn't bother me. Now, moving on to the strap of this watch, which really is a highlight for me. This strap is it's a distressed Italian leather strap with this very thick profile. I'll show you the side in relation to the watch itself. It has a nice thick profile, which is bound, as you can see here, well, just before the lugs of the watch, and then wax or rubber coated on the edges to avoid fraying. Again, it has two keepers, one fixed, one moving, and again bound with that soft string, which again lends to the distressed look of this strap. Now it picks up scuffs and wear, but so far has been extremely durable and very comfortable, albeit a little bit stiff at first because it is quite a thick leather strap, so it does require some breaking in. But I suppose that's to be expected with a strap of this type. The backing of the strap, unlike what you would think this strap would be from the front, this is actually a lined strap, which does offer a certain degree of comfort, and I do appreciate the fact that it's lined rather than just being a raw leather strap. It does also have some binding on the tip and does state, if I turn it over for you, Italian leather on the inside, and then simply Dan Henry on the other. Now this brings me on to another point about this watch, and this is the spring bars. These spring bars are quick release spring bars. They have a little lever here for the quick release of the strap, and this is very practical in my opinion for this particular strap. But also Dan Henry have made an effort. I'll just take the strap off to better demonstrate it. If I just place the watch down over here, the actual spring bars themselves are much thicker than usual spring bars at the tip, which does mean that these spring bars don't fit into other watches as easily as they do this watch, but do offer a great deal of strength and sturdiness, which is something I would like to see on a lot of watches. Now, I'll just take the strap off and replace it with the NATO strap which comes with this watch to show you what I think of that and how it works. Okay, so here is the watch in question with its NATO strap on, and this is a strap which has really interested me rather, because I've never seen a NATO strap like it in terms of some fundamental details. But I'll talk about the general overview of this strap. And it's this very, very thin but very strong, very, very rigid NATO construction, which feels more like, imagine a seat belt, but woven slightly more loosely. It has that sort of feel of thin but of a fine but great strength. Rather than having the sort of soft feel of other NATO straps, this feels much more military, which it can be a plus or a minus depending on your opinion. I rather like it because it offers a great change to my other NATO straps. But the really big details come around the lugs. Before I get onto that, it has brushed hardware, and again a signed, and this is like the strap itself, like the other leather strap. It has a signed, brushed and polished buckle, and the keepers are also all brushed. Now, the main details which are curious about this strap come if one simply takes this second fold off, and this reveals that this strap actually does have spring bars integrated, as you can see here. This strap has these little leather patches, these little leather pockets, if you will, which take a uh, a spring bar, which is also quick release. So these spring bars actually do hold the NATO strap to the watch, which offers an advantage really, because it means that suddenly you have a strap which the watch can't slide off, but while also offering that strength of a NATO, which means that if one of these spring bars were to break, the whole watch wouldn't be let loose and start flying around like it would perhaps happen if you did have a simple strap which merely attaches at the lugs. Now, this is an advantage and a disadvantage, I'd say, in terms of it's definitely a clever innovation in terms of making this strap more usable for people who don't have strap tools. But it does mean that the strap does come up at a sort of a very abrupt angle at the lugs, which I think is something which could be adjusted a little bit just to make this flap here slightly smaller in order to allow it to sit more flush. But it's certainly a nice touch to see a brand including this with their watch. But I must say that the biggest disadvantage of this is the fact that sadly I can no longer see the aeroplane on the back of this watch, which is a great pleasure to take this watch off and have a look. Um, anyway, I'll just put this watch down and give you a wrist shot. Okay, so on the wrist, this watch does wear very comfortably. It's 42.5mm diameter, and does sit very comfortably on the wrist. It also, as you'll notice from the way the lugs hug the wrist, it does make this watch very comfortable to wear under a shirt cuff or any other sort of piece of clothing of that type. Equally, the fact that this strap is very thin material, yet does have the strength to give confidence, does mean that the watch doesn't ride high like a lot of watches do on their NATO straps, which is, I suppose, a charm of a NATO strap, but for everyday practicality, this strap does make things easier. Now I'll just put it onto the leather strap to show you what it looks like on that. Okay, so on the wrist with the leather strap, this watch does wear very comfortably, and looks altogether more formal with this strap on the watch, rather than the more military aesthetic of the NATO strap. Now, equally, the watch can wear very comfortably on the wrist, and those lugs can really hug the wrist very easily, simply due to the fact there's nothing between the case back and the wrist. And I must say, this watch does wear comfortably. And equally, that crystal, though it seems like it domes rather high above the rest of the case, does actually slip very easily under a cuff, which is something nice to see. Now I'll just take it off and conclude the video. Anyway, that's the end of my review of this Dan Henry 1963, which I must say has been a pleasure to wear, and I really have enjoyed wearing. Now, it's strange, I've rarely come to the end of a video without having a sort of a constructive criticism to say about this watch. And apart from the slight issues with regards to the seating of the NATO strap, I really haven't found any issues with this watch at all, which is quite something, and I must say something to be applauded for Dan Henry as this new brand, this new up and coming brand. So I would encourage you to go and have a look on their website at this watch, and I'll include a link in the description down below. And I really must convey how impressed I am with this watch. So thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, then please do like, share and subscribe, and to see more content on this channel. Equally, do give me your thoughts on this watch and what you think of it in the comments down below. So thank you very much for watching. This is Arm on the Watch Guy, over and out.